Joe Biden is torching lesser evil. Biden is proving that the empire and U.S. hegemony trumps all things, including our freedom and rights. And I'm talking about the protests. Your right to protest is not higher than the empire's right to exercise their policy stance. Like it doesn't supersede that. Empire hegemony and empire trumps all things. And I continue with the tweet. Suppressing speech by banning TikTok, preparing for war with China, funding a genocide, and funding Nazis in Ukraine. How on earth can a social democrat, aka progressive Democrat, argue that Biden is the lesser evil? And I'm not a Trump supporter, and I don't want you to vote for Trump, but how is he the lesser evil, knowing what's going on during his administration? And I think it's reflective also in the polls, because people are saying, oh no, we remember the Trump presidency better than the Biden. And Morning Joe and all the other liberal people coping on cable news are just like, oh, where's this coming from? Like they laugh at it like this is so ridiculous. Really? You don't see a genocide? You don't see preparation for war with China? And people don't understand how big that's going to be. A war with China. But that is kind of what sparked it. And let's go to some of the other items I have here. Here is Joe Biden talking about the protests. So here is Joe Biden condemns a mini campus demonstration. This is him. Let's listen to Joey right here.
So let me be clear. Peaceful protest in America. Violent protest is not protected. Peaceful protest is. It's against the law when violence occurs. Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law. Vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest. Threatening people, intimidating people, instilling fear.
Shutting down class. What violence did he mention? Shutting down classes, shutting down graduation. That's violence. That's a peaceful. So what they're trying to establish here, because peaceful means without violence when we're talking about protest, but what they're trying to now establish is peaceful is to encompass civility. They are now trying to include the word peaceful to include civility. That's why they say threatening people. That's why they say making people feel bad. These aren't peaceful. You're not to disturb the process. That's not even a protest. Protest is supposed to disrupt, but he's saying that disruption is not protest. Then what is? Was civil rights a protest? This is fascism, people. This is fascism. So stop saying, oh, fascism may come to the White House. Fascism is here and it's been here.
Fearing people is not peaceful protest. It's against the law. Dissent is essential to democracy, but dissent must never lead to disorder or to denying the rights of others so students can finish the semester and their college education.
What?
Look, it's basically a matter
of legal protest.
It's a matter of what's right. There's the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos. So let me be clear.
That is what protest is. You don't have the right to cause chaos. I don't understand what this strategy is. Like, this guy is going to lose and lose badly. Here's another tweet that I put out here. Let's read this one. Joe Biden may be the only president in history to facilitate, cheer on, and support the arrest, detention, and suppression of his own voters. How many of those people on the college campuses are the same young voters in the polls that's not supporting him? Maybe he's presenting payback. Maybe he's saying, hey, you don't support me in the polls, then fuck you then. Maybe he's doing that. I go on to say Biden was already polling terrible with young constituents. Is having your voters arrested a strategy to improve your standing with young constituents? I just don't understand the strategy here. Now, I will get to this headline here, and it's United Front of Democrats and Republicans back escalation of police attacks on campus protests against genocide in Gaza. So let's actually read it. And then we're going to follow up with a video by Caitlin Johnstone. So let's read a little bit of this article. This is from where? Let me see. World Socialist website. That's wsws.org. You can look up the title here on that website. United Front of Democrats and Republicans back escalation of police attacks on college protests against genocide in Gaza following President Biden's green light last week for police assaults on peaceful campus protests against the U.S.-Israeli genocide in Gaza. Both the scale of police violence and the fever chart of arrests continue to rise. And as students in their thousands courageously defied the police state crackdown, demonstrating at graduation ceremonies across the U.S. over the weekend, the fascistic, I always have a problem with that word, rhetoric and bald-faced lies from Democrats and Republicans alike grow increasingly shrill and sinister. According to both the New York Times and Washington Post, more than 2,300 people have been arrested and criminally charged over the past 2 weeks for holding non-violent protests at U.S. campuses to demand an end to deliberate slaughter and starvation of civilians in Gaza, mainly women and children, and the termination by their schools of investments in corporations linked to the Israeli war machine and its crimes against the Palestinian people. This is why I say Joe Biden is torching the lesser of two evils. He's torching that. Because what are you saying now? We're going to end democracy? This is the democracy? The suppression that's coming from the Biden administration? I mean, we saw it all today. In other segments, Chris Hedges got his stuff removed because the billionaire who wants Joe Biden elected said, hey, do something, Max Alvarez. And voila. So what they're telling us to fear in Donald Trump is already here in Joe Biden. Ain't that something? Let's continue with this part, and I want to go to this video. This is Kate Johnstone. This is a really good video. I don't know if I can get through 7 minutes without interrupting it. I'm trying to play more content without me interrupting. That's why I keep taking myself off the screen. So let's listen to a little bit before I have to interrupt, because this is really good. Let's listen to Caitlin Johnstone, one of her latest pieces.
Opposing every war but the current one, supporting civil rights but never right now. In remarks defending the brutal suppression of university demonstrations protesting his genocide in Gaza, President Biden argued that protesting is allowed in the United States so long as it's polite and doesn't disrupt anything or upset anybody. We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or quash dissent, said Biden. The American people are heard. In fact, peaceful protest is in the best tradition of how Americans respond to consequential issues. But, the president continued, neither are we a lawless country. We are a civil society, and order must prevail. Biden went on to argue that violent protest is not protected as a form of free expression, sailing right past the fact that the only actual violence we've seen from these protests came from the police sent in to crack skulls and the bands of pro-Israel thugs who've been attacking campus demonstrators. Biden instead followed his false accusation of violence by listing offenses against inanimate objects, destroying property, vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows. He also listed the offense of shutting down campuses and the offense of forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations, none of which were done by the demonstrators. Threatening people, intimidating people, instilling fear in people is not peaceful protest, said Biden, citing 0 examples of this ridiculous allegation, adding that dissent must never lead to disorder, and that there's the right to protest but not the right to cause chaos. The president then, of course, went on to babble about anti-Semitism for a while, on no basis whatsoever. Again, This person is defending an authoritarian police crackdown on peaceful demonstrators protesting against his own actions. The US president is saying, don't worry about the jackbooted tyranny and suppression you're seeing against critics of the US president, because the tyranny and suppression is approved of by that same US president. And that's the Democratic Party for you, folks. That's everything it is right there. It is violence wrapped in politeness. It is fascism cloaked in lip service to civil rights. Shortly before Columbia University called in police to smash the anti-genocide demonstrations on campus the other day, 21 House Democrats signed a letter addressed to the university's Board of Trustees demanding they shut down the, quote, anti-Jewish activists on campus. It is past time for the university to act decisively, disband the encampment, and ensure the safety and security of all its students, the lawmakers declared. This is the same party that always cites its support for civil rights and social justice as a primary reason for people to vote for them, constantly referencing Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders who were intensely despised by the establishment of their own time as heroes we should all strive to emulate. Now they're openly supporting the same tyrannical measures as Republicans to shut down criticism of their government's genocidal and unjust policies, with no regard for the constitutional rights of those critics to speech and assembly. They try to make themselves look progressive and reasonable while doing it, saying it's about fighting anti-Semitism and keeping the peace. But their actual behavior is no different from the tyrants who attacked anti-war protesters and civil rights activists in the 60s. As Democrats get worse and worse the longer Biden's genocide in Gaza continues, I find myself recalling a tweet that went viral back in November by an account with the handle Eyeball Slicer. Quote, a liberal is someone who opposes every war except the current war and supports all civil rights movements except the one that's going on right now. End quote. That tweet has gotten more and more relevant every day since. If you were to pick a banner to hang above Western liberalism over the past 7 months, that banner would need to contain those words. It's been true of mainstream liberals for a very long time, but it encapsulates the response we've been seeing to Gaza with a special kind of perfection. Have you ever noticed how the spinmeisters responsible for normalizing our dystopian status quo use time as a psychological weapon?
I'm going to pause it here and play the rest of this later because she kind of goes into the second part, which is the weaponization of media. But what she says in this first part is a lot of what I kind of already, or some of the things that I spoke on, which is this idea that the description of what is acceptable in legal protest is just a new definition. And what they describe, if that were to be protest where you get a permit, where you don't disturb anybody, you don't break up anything, that's not a protest. The protest is supposed to disrupt. Now, remember when AOC said that? Where has she been with this repression, with this police attacks on the protests? Where has she been on this? They put out these generic videos like Bernie Sanders, just talking about the concept of protesting and not talking about the literal repression of protest that's happening.